One of the most popular names on this year's head coaching carousel, that's Dan the Man, Dan Mullen, new head coach for the UNLV Rebels. We talked about Barry Odom departing this year to go be the new head coach at Purdue. Now Dan Mullen gets another chance at college football. Obviously, things didn't work out like he wanted to at Florida. Had success at Mississippi State. Couple good years at Florida, I'd say, and maybe they ran him off a little bit too soon. But here he stands again, 3 years at ESPN. Now he gets a chance to prove himself on the field as a head coach again. Let's start off with the return of a proven winner. Right? We talk about his success at Mississippi State and Florida, known for the development of quarterbacks like Dak Prescott and Kyle Trask. And then he spent time in the media, spent a lot of time reevaluating his career, his coaching future, and really getting a deep dive into college football like we do on a daily basis in the media world. Now he transitions into the head coaching world again. How do you think he gets back into this role, first of all, and is he a proven winner once again at UNLV 3 years from now?
I'm glad you brought up his time at ESPN. Nate, I think, first of all, it's going to be a little, especially, we're probably, about a month away from spring practice.
Yeah.
Dan Mullen's probably going to be knocking the rust off a little bit from a coaching standpoint. He's been in the studio. He's, been taking flights and that kind of stuff. I think there's going to be a little bit of a reacclimation period from him from a coaching standpoint. That's going to be interesting to me.
Yeah.
He's got to think about, what he does in 2-minute situations, when to call timeout. So there's going to be some reacclimation. Nate, I will say it's intriguing to me because, we talked about a guy earlier in this episode, Scott Frost. He took away a year from football, and then 2024, he goes and is not an on-the-field coach, but he's an analyst with the Los Angeles Rams. To me, Nate, that's much different than when you're still around the game. Dan Mullen's been around the game, but he's looking at film still with the coach's eye, but in a different way, not a game planning way. That's going to be interesting to me. I love that you brought up two development guys. Look, you know about this guy. He coached Tim Tebow. He coached Cam Newton for 2 years.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with his time at Mississippi State. Look, Mississippi State is a tough place to win at. He had some good years at Mississippi State.
Very good years.
Dak Prescott was a big part of that. But you take a guy like Kyle Trask. Kyle Trask never started a high school football game. He had a really good player in front of him, and he developed Kyle Trask into one heck of a college football quarterback. Dan Mullen's a good offensive mind. He is a proven winner, and I know the Florida fans would disagree with that, and I totally get where y'all are coming from, but this is an intriguing one to me, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but he's got some things to overcome, but from a scheme standpoint and from him as a football coach, he's got a lot going for him, Nate.
Yeah, and I think the biggest takeaway from me is he's a QB guy.
Yes.
When you talk about the development of his quarterbacks, the Cam Newtons, the Dak Prescotts, the Kyle Trask, I mean, what a great fit for Malik Williams. We saw what he did last year. Now he gets an opportunity to be coached by Dan Mullen, one of the biggest quarterback gurus of all time. I'm excited to see what this guy is capable of doing with the quarterback room at UNLV, with that high-flying offense, and in a conference where it's anyone's game.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. And I think Dan Mullen's going to surprise some people on the offensive side. Now, jumping into why this school is a perfect fit for him, we'll talk about the modernize of the offense immediately, having to modernize their offense, and also his high football IQ and just a great game day head coach. Mm-hmm. Can you speak on that and what he brings to a program like UNLV?
Yeah, I think about UNLV. I mean, they have been right there in competition for the top team in the Mountain West for the past couple of years with Barry Odom and that very, very unusual, fun offense they've run. And they're going to do things differently. But, man, I'm going to tell you something I think about UNLV. Once again, I don't know, their NIL game. I don't know, their NIL resources. But from just a pure recruiting standpoint, Nevada and Las Vegas has got some good high school programs. You don't have to go that far from California. You don't have to go that far to Arizona. And then, I would say it's somewhat of a destination for transfer portal. You're in the entertainment capital of the world. They play in Allegiant Stadium. So there's some draws there, I think, for Dan Mullen to take advantage of in UNLV. Nate, I will say one point that I'm kind of intrigued by, and I just want to pull up, Dan Mullen's history here as far as, his past coaching. And I know this doesn't tell the whole story. And look, I think one of the things, Nate, that I think is interesting is we've gone through coaching carousels the past couple of years. To me, to an extent, I don't think there's some ADs when they're looking for a new coach, they're not necessarily pulled by a guy with regional ties. Now, there are some exceptions to that, but, Dan Mullen's never really been on the West Coast. He's been in the Mountain West and with his time at Urban Meyer, Utah, but he's been in the South, pretty, from 05 to 21 when he was at Florida as the OC, Mississippi State, and then back to Florida. So doesn't have a lot of ties out of there, but Barry Odom didn't either, and Barry Odom was successful there.
Yeah, I think the most intriguing thing to me with UNLV is the fact that they do really well in the portal.
Yeah.
I mean, they bring in guys like Ricky White from Michigan. So, I mean, this is a program that has the opportunity to go out there and get guys. And I think Dan Mullen's an intriguing voice in those living rooms. When he steps into the room, sure, he's not Bill Belichick. He's not Nick Saban. He's not Urban Meyer. But he does bring a lot of experience and a lot of winning cultures. And I think that's gonna play a tale in how he develops this UNLV program. Yeah. I think he's gonna have to go in and pitch an idea of a I keep using the word rejuvenation, but he's gonna have to build off of what Barry Odom was able to do in his time there. If you can win consistently 9, 10, 11 games at UNLV, I think you got a really good shot at making the playoff. The Mountain West is really starting to heat up.
Oh, it's fascinating.
When you look at UNLV, Boise State, and now Fresno State hiring Matt Enns, it could be one of the most competitive and granted, it's not the Big Ten, it's not the SEC. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you're going to see some stiff competition with these coaching hires, and you're going to see some exciting play. Maybe on a Thursday night, Georgia and Alabama aren't playing, but maybe Fresno and UNLV are teeing off in Las Vegas. I think it's exciting. I'm excited for the Mountain West future.
Yeah, Nate. One point that I'm intrigued by with Dan Mullen. Obviously, we know, hey, if Dan Mullen these next 2 years, if he gets his image back and if he gets his name back, I'm assuming there's going to be some big names come calling. But a trend that we've seen, and we've talked about this off the air, we've seen some head coaches, especially offensive and some defensive-minded head coaches, but, Chip Kelly being, I think, a good example. They're a head coach at, a program, and then they go be an OC somewhere. If Dan Mullen in that offense, if they put up 40+, does a big program that is in need of a innovative OC, do they go and say, Dan Mullen, we're going to make you one of the highest paid OCs in college football? I think that could be a route for Dan Mullen. I'm not saying it's going to be, but we've seen this more and more. And of course, look, Chip Kelly, he said, you know what, not doing it. He was fine at UCLA, but he's like, I got to go chance to, make probably just as much money, have a little less responsibility, but I get to be the man on offense. He goes there, wins the national championship, and now he's with the Raiders. I think this is going to be a trend that we continue to see. It could be if Dan Mullen's successful, the trend that he takes potentially to get back into the SEC, ACC, Big Ten. Could be.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. I think you could see Dan Mullen transition to a coordinator role. I could also see him transitioning to a bigger head coaching job.
Absolutely.
This is a guy who takes pride in his offense and his ability to coach a team. It's going to be up in the air for me whether he takes a coordinator spot. I think it's going to come down to recruiting and NIL. How much does he love recruiting, and how much can he handle with NIL? Because even at a small school, we saw with UNLV last year with Matthew Suka.
Great point.
NIL plays a part, and it doesn't leave. So to me, that's what it comes down to answer your question about, is he going to take a coordinator role or will he transition into another head coaching role? I think with Chip Kelly, I think he was just tired of it. Yeah. I think he just wanted to coach offense. That's exactly what he's done. He went and won a national title. Now he gets a chance to go get a new rookie quarterback for the Raiders, what we think will be a high draft pick for the Raiders. And I think we could see the same from Dan Mullen. It just depends on his take on recruiting. Next, we want to talk about his potential pitfalls. Let's talk about the recruiting, which we just talked about, embracing NIL, and his personality and ability to build a long-term program, stability-wise. We talked about his time at Florida, talked about his time at Mississippi State, and then talk about him going back to Florida. This guy likes to jump around.
Yeah.
This guy has a hard time. And look, we're all human, so I think some people, a lot of people have difficulty with that in job transition. They see a new opportunity. They want to go and challenge themselves. This is a guy who obviously likes to challenge himself. I wonder how that plays into it as well. Is that a pitfall for him and his career moving forward? Does he, as I mentioned earlier, does he get stars in his eyes and sand in his pockets, try to go for a bigger job and not pan out?
I will say one of the things that I am impressed with Dan Mullen, Mississippi State, we talked about, I was impressed with his time there. It's not an easy place to recruit at. It's not an easy place to win. And he stayed there a good while. And it took the Florida job to get him out of Starkville. It was a very mixed bag for him at Florida. Obviously, 2020 was a really good year. I mean, Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts, unbelievable offense. And then it spiraled after that. But if I'm Dan Mullen, and look, like we said, UNLV, it's a small program, but it's got some resources there. Just being in Vegas, being in a nice facility. I think I don't know that Dan Mullen gets back to the SEC, just because I do think that he was a good fit at Mississippi State, but I don't see him like I think if you truly ask Dan Mullen behind closed doors, he said I probably should have stayed at Mississippi State. And I know I'm putting words in his mouth, but that's not to say, a Big 12 job doesn't come calling or something like that.
Maybe a Baylor. A program like Baylor.
There's some intriguing hires out there. Like I said, I think Nate, the biggest question mark I have with Dan Mullen, he's been in college football world, but he's not been in the coaching game in 3 years. That is a factor. It is, and I'm intrigued by that. I really am. That is going to be the biggest thing: is can he reacclimate himself with the coaching aspect of it? Yeah,
and the schedule that comes with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were talking about it the other night, where college coaches they're exhausted.
18, 19-hour days sometimes.
It's honestly 24/7. You're babysitting. You're making sure that those promises are kept that you make in the living room with those parents, and then you're out on the road recruiting. You're coaching. You're watching film. It's next level. It is not easy, and you got to give props and hats off to all these guys who commit themselves to coaching the college game of football. So I'm excited to see what Dan Mullen can do. It's going to be a little bit different than what Barry Odom brought to UNLV with the defensive side. Now they get an offensive-minded guy. We're going to see how that translates. Yeah. If you're a UNLV fan, let us know down below what you think about this hire, Dan Mullen coming in, being a proven winner. Can he keep your program on the right track to winning the Mountain West and getting yourself a position in the next year and the year after playoff? We'll see you next week. Be sure to like this video and subscribe. It's time to break the huddle.